very, very proud to be leading the way in the emergence of blockchain entertainment. The whole reality of blockchain, NFTs, they're emerging at such an exponential rate, it's impossible for institutions to ever keep up with it.
I think it's so exciting that at last this amazing story of a slave born in the desert who becomes the greatest hero of his time is finally being made.
So Alex brought this project to me whilst I was working on various different projects last year. Kandahar, the Gerard Butler film that we're currently producing. What brought me to Antara project, it was an Arabian story told specifically from an Arab perspective, and Antara was a black hero. It was a true story. You know, he was a legendary poet, a warrior. It was a very kind of Shakespearean story about a forbidden love, but it felt very contemporary.
When I was growing up, Antara and his love story with Abla were very much part of the fabric of my day-to-day life.
This NFT is all about the democratization and the decentralization of the movie business. The NFT itself is a picture of Antara on a horse, holding his spear, proud, and returning back to his tribe with loads of camels. When you zoom in on this picture of Antara, it has an image of 12,000 camels, which you can only see when you zoom in. And when people buy the NFTs, in fact, it's going to be one of these camels, and as a whole, it makes the full picture of Antara.
I come from the studio world, and being Steven Spielberg's assistant for many years, I have seen all levels of production, from the top studio productions, as you can imagine, to scrapping on a $5 million independent film. And I have to say, I am so excited at the possibility of NFTs being incorporated in the financing of independent films.
Tarsem is an amazing director. So I worked with Tarsem on Emerald City, and I got to see him direct firsthand. You know, it's absolutely amazing how his visual composition is put together, his attention to the cinematographic palette of colors, his attention to the detail of the costume, and how he draws out great performances from his actors. For all of us at some point in our lives who have felt that we've, perhaps belonged in, but felt that we were excluded out, Antara gives you the sort of paradigm for how to just be the best version of yourself.
And he speaks to all of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another one of the Monaco Streaming Film Festival interviews. And today we'll be speaking with Alexander Amartei about the funding of his new movie through the sale of NFTs, which come with wonderful benefits for its holders. But before we get there, I'd like to get to know a bit about Alex and his background to discover where he got his inspiration from for making this movie. So let me introduce to you producer Alexander Amartei. Welcome.
Thanks for having us, Giacomo. And with regards to this film, it's a 6th century epic about the famous character Antara ibn Shaddad, he's the Alexander the Great of the Middle East, and his story is also the Romeo and Juliet of the Middle East. So unlike other movies like Troy, Gladiator, what's compelling about this is that it's a true story. Antara ibn Shaddad was a real life character, and he lived in Najd, which is Western Arabia, which shares some space with Oman and UAE. And I just thought, commercially, as an IP, as a franchise, there's so much depth in the story that it can lend itself, well to a franchise, and it can. It's got a lot of potential to have a lot of sequels and branding and merchandising and gaming. It's that big of a story. And behind that, it's all about concepts that I think are good for the world, like chivalry, honor, just being true to your words. And those were sort of characteristics and ideals that were very popular in that part of the world at that time. So I thought it's a great project to be able to bring to the West and introduce to the rest of the world.
Absolutely right. I think that a story like that has got, let's say, a couple of ingredients that make a good story. It's actually quite fascinating. Didn't you mention before that there's quite a lot of literature about the story of? Could you remind us all the name of this famous knight, this ancient knight from the Arabic. Was it? What was it? Over
Antara, yeah.
Yeah.
Antara ibn Shaddad. Antara ibn is son of, so Antara, who's the son of Shaddad, who was a famous chieftain, or he was also a knight in his own right as well. And Antara was, he's a larger than life character who, he was a warrior. He was initially a slave. He was born as a slave, and then he grew up to win his freedom, and eventually became a knight, largely due to his character, his power with the tongue. He's eloquent. He was articulate, and it just allowed him to propel himself into this century where we are now, still talking about this character and still making, and making movies about him. So in terms of the inspiration, there's a lot to this film in terms of, the literature, the martial arts, and that area of the world, which has a lot of mystique around it. There's two types of Saudi Arabia. There's the Saudi Arabia, the CNN Saudi Arabia. And then there's the Arabia of, the 1,001 Arabian Nights, with the winding sand dunes and the flowing turbans and the swords and the desert horsemen and things like that. And I think the symbology in those type of movies that the whole world can understand, in epics. But the inspiration was really from just identifying it as a story that the whole world needs to know. Antara is the underdog of underdog. Antara is the underdog of underdogs, let's say. And he symbolizes, what it is to go against all odds and come out triumphant, irrespective of color, creed, where you're from in the world and things like that. And it's just an all around inspirational story. It's going to be an epic like Troy Gladiator, but it's going to have a nice hint of martial arts. And I suppose the martial arts element, he is a warrior, and I have a love of martial arts. I was in China when I was 19. I went to the mountains of Wudang to study with the monks in Wudang Mountain in China, and I think there's a lot of wisdom that you learn from studying kung fu and qigong and tai chi and things like that, as opposed to doing MMA is a different lesson you learn in life.
I totally get you, because with you didn't only just practice in the mountains in Wudang in China, but you also actually sort of tried your hand in practice too. Can you tell us about your experience when you actually stepped in the ring with somebody else and how that went for you?
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. I did a film in 2019, which was about somebody undergoing all of the training in martial arts, and then all to culminate to a fight at the end in the octagon. And I did it a little bit differently. I wanted to create a syllabus which was a little bit more artistic, and so I did things like fencing, the Knightsbridge Fencing Club. I did boxing with Anthony Joshua's gym, BXR. We were doing horseback archery, so galloping on horseback, no hands with archery. And then, of course, like jiu-jitsu with Roger Gracie Club, and Muay Thai, kickboxing, a bit of everything, basically.
I heard that you knocked out your opponent in the first round.
Second round.
The second round. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's not even something I'm proud of. I used to like MMA a lot, and watching it and all the theatrics that surround MMA. But when you're in there, it's not. I no longer like it. Something inhumane about it, and you're forced to obviously, and to do what you do in there. And I was looking at the guy in the octagon, and I was thinking, like, he's all right. I'd be his friend in the normal life. It's. And there's just something when you're in there, it's not the same as when you're looking at it on TV. And for that reason, I don't think I'd do it again. It's there's not very dignified.
I think as a little child, I always grew up and I loved watching fighting movies and stuff like that. So I'm guessing that in this movie that you're now creating, it's also going to have a bit of that. Obviously, with the character being such a phenomenal. What a rich history coming from Africa, if I'm not mistaken, from Ethiopia as a slave, being traded into the Middle East, and then becoming such an incredible person. But not just, and I think this is to your point, which is not just in as a warrior, but also
yes, that's the point,
in the poetry and so on.
Yeah, not just as a brute. Basically, his mother was from Ethiopia. According to the story, according to legend, his mother's from Ethiopia. She was a princess, and she was taken by Shaddad to Arabia. So she became his concubine. And the law of the land in ancient Arabia in the 6th century is if you're born to a slave mother or a concubine, you're born as a slave. So that's your lot in life. And because his father was a chieftain and essentially a royal or an aristocrat, let's say, and his mother does come from noble blood. So it never really settled with him that he was a slave. He couldn't accept that. So his whole life was dominated by the concept of becoming free and also getting the recognition from all of the society that he is just like, if not better, than all of the people in his tribe. And that's why he fought almost psychotically to get that rank, both of freedom, but then beyond that to become a knight, and beyond that to be immortal in the books. And the thing about poetry of the ancient Arabs was that was their chronicle, that was their communication, their propaganda. All of their history would be arranged into poems recited by the most famous and powerful poets. So if you have a good poet in your corner, if you're a chieftain or a leader, if you have a good poet in your corner, that's your propaganda. That's your Daily Mirror or your Sunday Times or your Guardian in your corner. And how eloquent you are and how powerful and intelligent you can be with your lyrics, that determines the sort of the rank of your tribe. And it's really fascinating, the culture back then. So Antara, as a character, his poetry was so respected that it was sewn in gold and hung inside the Kaaba in Mecca. This is pre-Islamic, so this is before the days of Islam. So that's Antara as a character.
That's incredible. I mean, to come from a background like that, and also the entire, story of or culture of a poet being basically your propaganda tool. I think there's a sort of sense of beauty in that, actually.
Absolutely. You know? And he said something like, one of my favorite lines of Antara is, he said, if they ask you about me, tell them that I plunge into the uproar of war, yet I abstain from the spoils. And by that, he means, like, he was known for when there was a war or a raid, he'd plunge straight into it, into the thick of it, fearlessly. He'd kill only the most dignified or the most reputable warrior. He'd kill the champion of the opposing side. Once that's done, he'd depart. And all of the booty and all of the spoils of war, he wouldn't touch it. He'd leave it for poor people, or that was his statement to say, that's how rich I am as a character. Well, I'm better than all of you. I defeat your opponents for you. I protect you. And I don't take any of your spoils of war. That's his statement. And that's a very sophisticated ideology to live by, and a sort of a creed or a code of conduct to put yourself up against, So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think telling this story is going to be so difficult for you, because it sounds like this is just one of those stories that once you start getting into it, it's going to be impossible. Like you might have to end up making a series out of this.
Well, that's the idea. It lends itself very well to a franchise. And the good thing about them is because it's got the African twist, it's got the intertribal warfare. So, the tribes against tribes, but it's also got the Persians and the Byzantines in his story throughout his life. And they were the surrounding, either territories or powers that be. And they all interplay with the ancient Arabia in their own special way. So it's
You mentioned ancient Arabia. Could you give everyone a bit of a sense of what times these were back then, just to give them a little bit of a setting for when these battles
events took place?
Yeah.
So this was Antara was born in about 80 years before the dawn of Islam. So I think he died about 4 years before Islam was proclaimed. Okay. In that region. And ancient Mecca was like the cosmopolitan hotspot of the world back then. It was the center of trade. You'd have everybody there, from Jews, Christians, pagans, Chinese, Indians, Persians, Byzantines, all coming there for trade, because it occupies that strategic location that connects Yemen, which was a big trading spot, and Ethiopia and Egypt and the east and the north of Persia and everything. So he would have lived in that time. Poetry was everything, as in, it was the hope of every household that one of their children would grow up to be a poet. Just like today, people say, one of their children to be a doctor or what have you. That was the thing then. So, and he was different because he was black. Even though there was black people there, he was just, like he said about himself, you make me hate my difference, but I love the difference it makes. That's what he'd say about himself. Yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing. I can't believe that the story actually hasn't even been told before. And actually, I think that segues us quite nicely into how people can become a part of the story by you're now launching a whole campaign on selling NFTs, which allows people to become a part of your story. Why don't you? I think this has a lot of connections as to why you're doing it. I would love to hear from you. What was your motivation for raising the funds for this project from NFT sales?
Yeah, so I think it's there's a lot of first mover advantage in it. This is the first major movie in history to be funded by NFTs, so you can never be the first again. So that makes the NFT a real collectible.
And the first really good story.
Well, here's the thing. You want to introduce this to a world. So just about the NFTs, you're buying existing IP. Yeah. So this is the IP of the movie that NFT owners are buying a part of, and therefore they own a part of the movie, and gives them an opportunity to have to partake in the box office and streaming revenues. So, that makes the NFT itself as a collectible one of the first in history. And we're selling them also as physicals as well as digitally. People are going to be able to get them in some galleries around the world. So, imagine a situation where you have a 2x2 meter picture on your wall in a nice glass frame, and that's your ownership of the first movie in history funded by NFT. It's on the wall, and it gives you an income via, let's say, box office or streaming revenues. It's got good bragging rights to it. And the interesting thing is it will stabilize the secondary market in a way, because the people who have their NFTs on their wall, chances are they'll never sell them. They'll just keep them, So, so we split the movie into 12,000 NFTs. It's a $45 million budget. And
it's quite big.
Yeah. Well, you want to, this business model is basically you buy an NFT whilst the movie is being made. You stake the NFT or do yield farming, which is basically you agree to lock up the NFT and its value for a certain period of time, and you get a yield for that in return. So yields on staking or yield farming can be anything between 20%, in some cases 300%, which a lot of people don't understand because they don't understand DeFi, and I think that's another conversation for another day. But long story short, with our NFTs, it's between 20 and 80% yield on the NFT. So imagine a situation where you're making a $50 million or $100 million movie. It's done via NFTs. The NFTs are then staked or put in for yield farming. And let's say even 50 to 80% of the money back before principal photography or before the movie is even produced. That is completely game changing in Hollywood, or any industry for that matter. I mean, even with shipbuilding or real estate, you fund something via NFTs. You have most of the money back before the project is even complete. And then once the project is complete, thereafter, you have box office or streaming revenues or a yield from income from a tenant or leasing something out. So as a business model, to merge NFTs with DeFi, with an industry, it's completely game changing. So we wanted to introduce this to the world with an iconic movie, with the gravitas of something like Antara, as opposed to a $2 million movie about a man and his dog, so to speak, Yeah. So, yeah.
So essentially, coming in as an early investor, you have the advantage that while the movie is being produced, that the value of those NFTs are going up because, of course, they, at the beginning, there's the most risk, but as you go through the production process of the movie, the value of those coins start increasing until the point where the movie is actually complete. And then when the movie is complete, then the price, what happens to the price then? Then the price is kind of based on the market, or at least the yield is going up. And I'm supposing that the price of the coin is then supporting the yield that the early investors are receiving.
So you sort of, in some cases, you have to let the secondary market speak for itself, because as a collection, as a collectible, should I say, you have no idea what that could be worth in 10 years as the first in history. And you don't know what trends are going to take place in the market and how people are going to perceive that in 5 years or 10 years. But there's inevitably and undeniably a huge value in the first of something. of this scale. The yield from the yield farming, that's just extra income whilst people wait for the movie to be produced, and then after that, there's income from the actual movie itself. But what price the NFT will be worth then? It could be, at the moment it's 1 ETH per NFT. Then it could be 3 ETH, it could be 10 ETH. Depends on how busy the secondary market is. If people want to keep it forever, and let's say out of a collection of 6,000, only 500 people want to sell, you've got people all around the world who let's say would want it, and only 500 people who are willing to sell. So you really, you can't predict these things. And it's really important to say that this is not an investment, because this is a non-regulated area of the market. This is a collector's item. And we all know that when people buy NFTs, some buy them to collect, but some people buy to speculate, and some people buy as an investment. That's their intention, if you know what I mean. But we have to be very careful, because, we don't want to call this a security. No, this is not a security. And so it's a collector's item. But yeah, you always have to make those disclaimers, because it's not a regulated area of the market.
That's actually a good idea. I think I'm also going to put out a disclaimer to everybody who's going to view this video. And
not financial advice. Yeah.
This is not financial advice, ladies and gentlemen. And
beyond that, it's not all about money.
About an interesting project, about an interesting story that Alexander has, decided to turn into a really, really cool project. And on that note, I actually wanted to ask you, tell us, what are some of the benefits that the investors of these NFTs would have? I mean, the actual holders. I understand that there's some additional benefits that they can get, because essentially they will be supporting your venture, your idea.
So with regards to the utility of the NFT, this is where we wanted to make it a little bit fun, interactive, experiential. And some of the people who own the NFTs, some of them can get a part in the movie, an acting role. And depending on their experience, it could be a very significant acting role, or just like an extra, swinging a sword or riding a horse or wearing body armor, so getting an acting role and getting producer credits. So after the movie, the credits roll, you'll have the picture of their camel, camel number 1204. A special thanks to, all these camels. And some of them can come location scouting with us in the desert. Some of them will be able to come out and hang out on set in the desert, meet the cast and crew, just meet the team, meet the director, meet the actors, things like that, and just watch some of the battle scenes being filmed, things like that. So there's that experiential element as well. So like, imagine a situation where you own the NFT, you hang it on your wall, you get called out, you get a part in the movie, and you get to just hang out and just witness the whole thing. And it's quite an exclusive thing. Most people have never been on a film set in life. Most people, 95% of people, they've never been on a film set. So it's quite cool in that respect. And it's in the desert. And it's just, it's not like going into a studio in, somewhere in Europe where you just go in for the afternoon and have a coffee. So, and then we're giving some giveaways as well. Like, for example, as a celebration after we finished selling out our collection, there's a Lamborghini giveaway. There is 3 Rolexes and the 24-carat bar of gold. And there's some other things as well that we'll be doing as giveaways, just to sort of make everything fun. And there's other things that we're doing with our NFT community as well, there's maybe 17,000 people now in our Discord growing. And there's a lot of fun stuff we're going to be doing as a community as well, beyond just the movie. So it's a cool space to be.
That is really cool. I think that's what it's really about, because what you're doing with this is kind of creating a community around your thing, and that was just the last point that you were coming out, and that's something that I just wanted to double click on, because I think that those people that they'll be part of your community, they're also going to be your biggest fans of the movie, and you sort of they'll be talking to their friends and telling them about how cool this project was, but they'll also be so involved in the whole making of it, and not just the movie. It'll be for the whole entire franchise and everything that comes out of it afterwards. Because you've mentioned before that you wanted to turn into a franchise and do a couple of things. Maybe just tell us, like, if you could list maybe some of the ideas that you've come up with so far, if I'm allowed to ask. Hey?
Yeah. I was going to say, these are sorry, my battery died on these. I switched to speakerphone. So of course we wouldn't want to say too much on that, but the whole idea of Antara property, he's just a real larger than life character that deserves to be known even by children as well. Like in today's world, I think there's a lot of things that people learn on, in movies and TVs and TV programs and things like that, which they're not very helpful to raising children in a good way, basically, and you want things that you can, good role models to look at on the TV for your children. And I think he's got that sort of profile as well. The things you learn from his poetry and from his attitude in his life, some of them can be, it inspires the world instead of dragging the world down. And I suppose that's one of the main things for it. And then
I'm inspired. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to say there's just other things, in terms of like merchandising and toys and things like that we've got planned. So it's a full, it's a long term.
So the NFT holders are basically holders of like all of the IP essentially. That's really cool.
Yeah, they're of the movie. Because we cannot speak intelligently about what's beyond the movie, because the first thing that has to be completed is the movie. Once that's done, then we can speak intelligently about beyond that.
Great. So tell us why it is that you chose, besides creating community, why it was that you didn't decide to go the traditional routes of funding a movie through like the Hollywood style kind of, sources or routes. Let's put it like that. Yeah, if you would elaborate on that.
Too much headache, so convoluted, so much time wasting, and the distributors are not even in, there's too much agenda with distributors, in the world of movies. There's, one distributor will say, no, we're only looking for the divorce category for the next 6 months. Or one will say, no, it has to have this lead. No, it has to have a black lead. And sometimes you just want to make a movie because it's there to be made. You don't want to be dictated too much. Fair enough, they're interested in giving people representation and a fairer world. I get it, but don't overdo it. You know what I mean? And this way, it's just power in numbers. Community dictates. They can decide if they want to have a movie scene or not, and then it gets made. And there's just a whole lot more flexibility, allowing you to bypass all the things we hate about Hollywood and focus on the things that we love about the movie business. The real magic that should be there. The Cecil B. DeMille era, where you can do great projects, and that's where we're going with it. And not only that, it creates a whole new ecosystem where digital artists, score composers, cinematographers, directors, producers, financiers. It provides a new ecosystem and a new platform where they can all integrate and collaborate in a whole new way, which is sort of really stripping Hollywood of that central governance. I think it's in everyone's favorite, because nobody's really that excited to go to the cinema anymore, because the same things that are coming out are completely predictable. You know the ending before you watch the movie, and they're just going with these safe releases where they know they're at least going to make a certain margin, and that's good enough. So we want things to be a little bit more bold, where we can just do what needs to be done. So and the not just the movie business, but every industry is changing, and it's been majorly influenced by crypto, the digital era, Web3, NFTs, and just the different ways in which you can transact and create. And so it's an inevitable process of development.
I think the opportunities are endless for this thing that you're creating, actually. I think I wanted to close up everything with or wrap up with you by asking you where people can find your tokens, your coins. Where are they? Where can they find them? And how can they get involved, basically?
Sure. So there's two ways. One is to follow us on Twitter, arabiancamels.io, and the other is to join the Discord, which is where the community hangs out and answers questions for everybody. And we're going to have a whitelist opening soon, so people can get on the list to be able to acquire the NFTs when we do the public minting, which is going to be in the coming weeks. But yeah, it's important to be involved in the community, get to understand, because it's educational as well. If people who are new to NFTs, it's a good place to sort of go to learn a little bit more about NFTs and how things work. And so our Discord, the link is on our Twitter, on our website as well, arabiancamels.io, and follow us on Twitter is @arabiancamels. And we'll be
all right, everybody. So that's it. You know what to do now. You go and follow Alex's project on Twitter, on Discord. And it's been absolute pleasure talking to you about this incredible story. And I can't wait to see this movie. And I can't wait for others to see it. You have no idea how excited I am.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, no, it was a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you. And hopefully, yeah, if we have I don't know if the premiere will be timed correctly, but we'll definitely do something with the Monaco Streaming Film Festival, hopefully. And it was a pleasure. Good talking.
Fantastic. It was a real pleasure. So take care then, Alex, and thank you very much.
Au revoir. Thank you.
Bye.
All the best.